praise him or criticize him? Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I'm a geek, you're watching Kevin the Geek. Welcome back to my Doctor Who weekly reviews. I'm continuing on with Series 6 and today we're doing the Series 6 episode, The God Complex. Now, I'm not gonna lie. When you have to watch this episode 3 times in order to be able to refresh your memory of it, in order to be able to do a review, that doesn't bode well for the episode, does it?
Compulsive viewing.
Now, of course, I always like to do a little bit of quick glancing. Once I have sort of scored the episode, as I always do, because I score all my Doctor Who reviews to give an overall score to help with rankings and things, I like to just kind of get a very initial idea of what other people's perceptions are of the episode. Not like listen or read full reviews of something, but just a general just to go, do people like it? Do people not like it? And the general consensus of what I saw with this episode is that people like it. People really like this episode. In fact, I've seen thumbnails for this episode for reviews going, the greatest Doctor Who episode ever. And I'm just thinking, really? Really? This you're considering one of the best Doctor Who episodes ever?
Seriously?
Wow. Have we been watching the same episode? Have we been watching something different? Because I tell you what, this is something that, yeah, it just doesn't work for me as an episode. Now, I'm going to appreciate what it tries to do in this episode. First of all, I'll say the location for it and the hotel idea of it, very Shining-esque. Very, very much so. I mean, I only watched The Shining for the first time last year. I actually did a reaction for it on the channel. Go and check it out if you haven't seen it. But the idea that for me, the hotel almost becomes a character in and of itself, that is very much The Shining. That's what I said when I watched The Shining. Like, the setting was as an integral character as all of the actual human characters. And I did feel it with this one. But the problem is there's a lot of stuff that drags it down. You know, I think I would say the supporting cast is probably the strongest aspect of this episode. And we had quite a few supporting characters in this one. So, of course, you have Rita, you have Howie, Joe, and Gibbis. They're the main kind of 4 kind of supporting characters that you have in this episode. And ironically, when I think back to this episode, because I've really only watched it the once before watching it 3 times today in order to try and do the review. And that was literally when I watched it when I aired. And all I could ever think about when I thought about this episode was, this is the episode that has a Minotaur and David Walliams. That's it. That's literally all that I could remember of this episode. And I will give David Walliams a bit of credit here, because all I could really remember of him being in this episode was going, that's David Walliams. That was it. I gave him no credit for his character. Watching it this time, I tried to take away the knowledge that he was David Walliams in this one. And I like the idea that his race, I think it's the Tivoli, I like the idea that they are a race that is the most conquered in the universe, which makes them abject cowards.
I take it from the pathological compulsion to surrender, you're from Tivoli.
Yes, the most invaded planet in the galaxy. Our anthem is called Glory to insert name here.
And the fact that his job is city town planner.
Oh, well, I was at work, I'm in town planning. We're lining all the highways with trees so invading forces can march in the shade.
Oh,
Which is nice for them.
yeah.
The other characters, I'll say Howie and Joe, they were fine in what they needed to do. Rita, I really liked.
Besides which, if it's a trick, it'll tell us something.
Oh, you're good. Oh, she's good. Amy, with regret, you're fired.
What?
Now, I am actually planning, I'm trying to put together a ranking at the moment where I rank, in my opinion, 10 characters, or possibly the top 10 characters, who should have been companions for the Doctor, but weren't. She never made this list, well, at least in the rough form that it's currently taking. I may have to add her to that list. She is a really good character. She has great dynamic with the Doctors. And just the way that she is and the way that she speaks is brilliant. And I tell you, her death scene was heartbreaking. And, well, of course, we didn't actually see the death, but the stuff leading up to it, it was truly heartbreaking to watch.
I don't want you to witness this. I want you to remember me the way I was. I'm gonna hang up.
No, Rita!
Goodbye, Doctor.
Rita!
Thank you for trying.
Rita, please! Please! Please!
And that's probably the only really, really good bit of this episode. Now, of course, your main cast, the Doctor, the companions, they were fine. There wasn't really anything that I could shout home about. You know, the Doctor was fine. He had that good moment with Rita. The rest of the time, he was just, yeah, he's average. He's half decent, you know. But there was nothing really stand out about him. Amy, similarly, actually, I didn't feel, yeah, it was, again, she was fine. Rory probably had a little bit more of an edge, and I like the idea that he was the only one out of them who really had no fears out of all of them, and so he therefore didn't have his room, which I need to talk about the room situation, because for the concept that they were going with, I could kind of understand that sort of fear of Amy being left behind. Yeah, that's the fear that she would have had as a child. At the same time, you're like, but she's overcome that because the Doctor has come back. Or is it an ongoing fear that the Doctor's not going to come back? And I like the faith aspect of it, is that she has the faith in the Doctor, but that is the thing that ultimately cripples her.
I stole your childhood and now I've led you by the hand to your death. But the worst thing is I knew this would happen. This is what always happens.
Which, ironically, with Toby Whithouse writing this episode, he has done this before in 2 other episodes that he's written. He, of course, did School Reunion back in Series 2, and he did Vampires of Venice in Series 5. And in both times, he sort of addresses the idea that the Doctor wants to let characters, or rather let his companions, leave before he ends up getting them killed.
I don't age. I regenerate. But humans decay. You wither and you die.
It's not that you make people take risks, it's that you make them want to impress you. You make it so they don't want to let you down. You have no idea how dangerous you make people to themselves when you're around.
And I like that he sort of brought it back up here, but then that leads me on to the Doctor's room. And I appreciate that it wasn't Toby that kind of did this. Or maybe he had it in the back of his mind and gave Stephen Moffat the idea later on. But when it got brought back in the time of the Doctor, the final episode with the 11th Doctor, they brought back what was in the room. You should have just left it alone. You should have let it be a mystery. I mean, I had my ideas about what it was the Doctor's greatest fear in those in-betweening years when we didn't know. And I did come up with various things. And I think in my head, it was the Doctor getting his companions killed. Almost like Molly Weasley's boggart in the Harry Potter series, that she's fearing seeing her children or her husband died. I think it would be a similar thing for the Doctor. In my head, in my theological canon, I think the fear of seeing Amy getting killed, or Rory getting killed, or Rose, or Martha, or Sarah Jane Smith, or whoever, that would be his greatest fear. So I think it should have been left ambiguous, because the reality, what we actually got when we eventually found out in the time of the Doctor that it was the crack in time.
Tiny sliver of the 26th of June, 2010, the day the universe blew up.
That was the Doctor's greatest fear? Really? Come on, Stephen Moffat. I had so much better expectations of you for that. Yeah, I just think that this episode, overall, is a bit of a mess of an episode. I do appreciate what it's trying to do. I appreciate the theoretical knowledge of it and the symbolisms and everything. But ultimately, as an episode, it was just a bit average. And like I said, it took me 3 attempts to watch this episode. Because I'm thinking, right, I'm going to really study it and really focus. And then just all of a sudden, start looking at my nails and I start, I'll go, oh, there's a bit of skin that's picking, I'll just pick that off. Or, oh, I'll just quickly pick up my phone, or I'll just look at it. And then before now, I'm scrolling through Facebook and YouTube and looking at my comments and stuff like that, going, oh, hang on, there's 10 minutes gone by, I don't know what's just happened. I wasn't paying attention. And that, crucially, is a very big negative aspect of this episode, that you have to then go back and rewatch it and rewatch it again. I will say that the ending I did quite like, where Amy and Rory sort of leave the TARDIS. I think that was sort of building up. I'll talk more about it, I think, at the end of Series 6 and then more towards the start of Series 7. Because I always do wonder, would it have been better to let them leave or not? Because it was very interesting that they brought up the Doctor wants to allow his companions to leave before ultimately they end up in a situation where they get killed. Which, of course, ultimately, spoiler alert, does sort of happen. So, yeah, we'll have to address that in a future review. The one final thing I just want to quickly say, going back to Gibbis, the cowardly character, like I said, I really, really liked him. But watching this, it made me think back to a quote that was from, I think it was from The Voyager, The Damned, actually. I think it might have been Mr. Copper who said it.
Of all the people to survive, he's not the one you would have chosen. But if you could choose, Doctor, if you could decide who lives and who dies, that would make you a monster.
I think that's very apt for this. Because Gibbis, he's a very complex character. There's some elements that you're like, well, I can kind of sympathise and root for him a little bit. That he's just his whole race, his whole existence is predicated on being subservient and being cowardly, but he is quite manipulative. So, like I think pretty much anyone who watches this would have wanted Rita to survive. The other ones, I think you could have taken on leave. Gibbis, probably, after especially what he does to Howie, I think you'd go, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing him die. But again, that would make you a monster. So I just found that interesting when it was a random thought that just popped into my head, and I couldn't even remember what episode it came from. I had to look it up, of course, afterwards. But yeah, I think it's very apt in this situation. But that is going to kind of round up my review. So, of course, I now need to score the episode. If you are new, then please, first of all, go back and check out all of my other Doctor Who reviews. I've done a couple of Doctor Who rankings, I've done some reviews, some reactions as well, loads of different stuff. But I've done all the episodes up until this point of New Who, and every single one, I give 10 categories a score out of 10 to give an overall score out of 100. And that helps me when I do a ranking like I did for the first Russell T Davies era, where I ranked every single episode from his era. And that was a mammoth task. But by doing it in this way, through the reviews, it actually made it a little bit easier to a certain point. So, these are the scores for the God Complex. And so the God Complex has scored 58 marks out of 100, which makes it a C graded episode. I'm not going to lie, this was arguably the hardest grading I ever had to do in any of these reviews so far. I think what made it especially difficult is I kept going back and changing them. I think at its highest point, I probably gave it around about a sort of 67, 68, which would have made it about a sort of a B- sort of grade. But then I kept thinking about it, and I was thinking back and comparing it to other reviews and other episodes I've ranked. I was like, I can't score this number, because that is definitely not as good as this. And so I kept just trickling it down to the point where I got, right, I can now feel comfortable that this is the right level for this episode to be at. Like I said, I'm surprised that people rate it so highly. You know, I like the ideas behind it, but the execution, I just found it lacking. For me personally, you're welcome to disagree, and please do put your comments down below. Let me know what your thoughts are of the God Complex. And speaking of episodes that I tend to disagree with, next week we're doing Closing Time, the return of James Corden in Doctor Who. And yeah, I remember the first time I ever spoke about that episode, and I got into massive arguments and massive disagreements about it. So, join me next week for my latest Doctor Who review. Join me for all of my other content I do on a daily basis. But that's going to do it for today. So thank you very much for watching. For now, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.